part of it is you have these expectations that the organization as a whole should probably find out this information and report back to you. And some of it is I've finally learned that, like, if I want to know this information about myself, like, I just need to take it into my own hands and figure out how to ask the right questions and follow up,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I that's really, really interesting. So thinking about that a little bit differently. So it sounds like your team has different skill sets and different, not just different expertise, but also different skill sets, especially with technology is kind of what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, kind of thinking about this fairness question again, even though some who may have a broader skill set and be able to produce more work, for lack of a better word, do you think those people that are more advanced feel like they're pulling extra weight, or do you think they think that it's a pretty fair work distribution? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Because of this whole idea that they work autonomously and they get to choose to collaborate, it's like every time, and just to be specific, like the usual amount of collaboration is that you would produce a webinar together. And so you would collaborate to put that together. And so it's almost like for each webinar, they negotiate how they're going to work together. And, whoever has the lead speaker or the lead content, it just kind of settles it out. And I've never seen anybody get too frustrated if that does happen. Usually the feedback loop is pretty good, and we just make sure that we talk to that person and we just tell them we'll support them and tell them that, we don't expect them, or we're asking them not to do more like video editing in the future, or we'll use that as feedback to help the teams consider different possibilities for creating certain kind of input. So from a learning and I don't know if I call it innovation, but just a learning and improvement cycle, I think we're pretty good at picking up those problems and figuring out how to come up with other ideas so it doesn't stress people out.
Nice. Got it. Cool. So, right. So thinking again about, it sounds like you have a lot of different individuals that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Some, like you said, are a little bit more individualistic. Some like to collaborate, different skill sets, different expertise. Kind of putting that all on the table. Do you consider yourself, do you think that you treat each of those people differently based on, this is a little tricky. Do you act differently with them because their skill set or preferences or ability? Like, in other words, do you really flex your style based on the person you're working with, or would you consider yourself pretty, consistent as you manage or lead or collaborate?
Sure. I think I saw this in the on your LinkedIn that we're going to address that. Yeah. And I thought about it because I really think of myself as like an agile, flexible person, but now in a middle manager role, you don't want to like have favoritism and stuff. So I do find myself thinking, when I help people, like what would be fair. But I do think, so there's one team that they almost don't need my help. And when I meet with them, I will just ask them, they will already have an idea of how they want to do something. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll ask them what they're doing, why they're doing it. Usually there's a really good reason. And then usually I'll go back and say, you know what, I think we should implement this and share this with everybody. And so usually that's like reformatting the website to do something better, And then there's somebody, so there's this other person that is very challenged to use the website. And we just went through some changes. And so she emailed me and I'm like, well, should I teach her how to do this?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to fix it for her because we're going to change it again in another month. And when we change it permanently for another month, I'll show her what we did. And, I'll post something. So hopefully she can reference it later. But, so that's kind of the difference. Sometimes I'll actually use people's input or sometimes I'll do it for them if it's, not going to shortchange them too long in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I can definitely relate. Interesting. Okay. So what I'm hearing, and this is, not good, bad, or anything. It sounds like you are, I mean, it sounds like you're a very fair manager, and it sounds like you really know where your strengths are and kind of your style. But it also sounds like you flex your style a lot, just even in that small example you just gave. So it sounds like if you think of a spectrum or a pendulum, if you will, it sounds like you might be, swinging back and forth a little bit in your style. Does that sound right?
Yeah. 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 I feel like I'm flexing. I feel like I'm flexing all the time. And actually, I have to say, like I told my husband this week, I said, I am so exhausted.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm flexing different personalities, but we are a virtual team with virtual tools where we have underdeveloped philosophies for how we want to use these things. And it just feels like there's friction, at almost every point in the day. And I think one of my skill sets is making the friction go away and making people work together better. But it is getting to the point where it's draining me to, I really have to be careful about self-care, and I really have to start figuring out how to find those boundaries.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd love for you to dig in a little bit more to that feeling if you can, because I was talking to somebody else and she said something very similar. She said, I'm just exhausted at the end of the day. But the way she was describing it was, exhausted, but she had an energy. She was very, very motivated, and I'm not saying you're not, but it was almost like like it energized her. But with you, it sounds like, but tell me how you feel. It sounds like it's no longer, or it's not quite that energizing level for you.
No, I think a part of it is I've really thought a lot about this, and this particular project does not align with my, I don't know if I want to say core values, but there's certain things about the core values of the leadership team I'm on that either haven't been fully developed or are just not present. And then the subject matter of what I do, while I think what we do is really important, the connection even with the military is something that it rubs. And so that is part of, I used to do work for gardening and landscaping and horticulture, and I got my bachelor's and master's for it. And so every day was like, I just loved it. I was learning all this other stuff, I could sit in our Facebook feed for hours and soak up stuff. And now all of that stuff is just one more thing to filter, because it doesn't relate to that personal core.
Yeah.
So to me, that's where the big difference is. And it's a bummer because I always envisioned myself as that person that's super energetic. Yeah. And I don't like to put that off that I'm not, but I think that's part of it.
Wow. Isn't that interesting that, it's, we always talk, not we, but you always hear about, find something you love and it gives you energy. And it's like, you can like your job. Like I'm sure you